Actors engage in an astonishing double act, both transforming themselves into other people and revealing their most personal emotions. Few have done that better than the actors who've made a mark in this year's best films. On this episode, we have Benedict Cumberbatch, The Imitation Game, Ethan Hawke, Boyhood, Michael Keaton, Birdman, Eddie Redmayne, The Theory of Everything, Timothy Spall, Mr. Turner, and Channing Tatum, Foxcatcher. Welcome to the Hollywood Reporter Roundtables, The Actors. I'm Stephen Galloway, and welcome to the Hollywood Reporter Roundtables, The Actors. I'd like to welcome Timothy Spall, Ethan Hawke, Eddie Redmayne, Benedict Cumberbatch, Channing Tatum, and Michael Keaton. Several of you have played real-life characters, and I want to ask, in the research you did, what most surprised you about the particular character you played? Benedict, you played famous British codebreaker.
Yes, Alan Turing. I think what surprised and relieved me, really, because of the math and the science being well out of my reach, was the fact that everything he brought to us as a scientist, as an incredible, unique thinker, was brought about by his interaction with the world, by everything he felt and experienced as a human being, as a physical body, as a sexually active homosexual man, as an athlete, as an Olympic standard marathon runner, as somebody who wasn't isolated in an ivory tower, or, you know, just this sort of removed brain in a glass jar. You know, he was very in tune with his world, which I guess that's immediately an easier way to understanding someone who's so sort of removed from your capabilities, who's just beyond something you could ever possibly hope to achieve, let alone pretend to achieve. So it helped to sort of humanize a very complex intellectual life into something that we could all relate to.
Got more secrets than the best of them.
What if I don't fancy her in that way?
Can't tell anyone, Owen. It's illegal.
I'm just a mathematician.
Sometimes it is the people who no one imagines anything of, who do the things that no one can imagine.
Was there any factual thing you found out about him that surprised you?
A lot of it, an awful lot of it. I mean, all sorts of details, but just randomly the fact that at the end of his life, he was given this sentence after being prosecuted for being gay in a time of intolerance in the 50s in England. And he was given the choice between 2 years imprisonment or 2 years chemical castration through state-sanctioned estrogen injections. And he chose the latter in order to carry on his work, so that at least if he wasn't allowed to love in his life the way he wanted to love and was able to love, that he could carry on with his work the other half of his life.
When you hear that, honestly, you almost laugh because
it's shocking.
It's
so
like
poorly.
if somebody did an insane, brilliant satire on people's attitudes toward homosexuality.
Yeah.
That's what you'd come up with.
It's
yeah. Insane.
It's
Given the
beyond
choice,
imagine.
We're going to make him wear a
and it's
bra.
a horrible choice.
Yeah.
Between castration and prison, which would you take?
A prison, I think. But this man was so driven with his work, and you know, the thing I was going to say, the thing I found out was that he'd said in an anecdote to a friend, because I wanted to find out how that affected him, how that changed him for the scenes I played whilst the treatment was going on. And I spoke to a colleague of his who worked with him in Manchester, where it all happened. He said, Alan, it was very private, so I didn't notice much, he didn't talk about it much, but he did say to me one day that the doctor was finding it very embarrassing giving him weekly estrogen injections, and gave him the opportunity to assuage and get rid of this embarrassment by implanting a small, slow-release device in his hip that would be enacted by his metabolism. And it was supposed to stop dosing him after 2 years, and he was telling me this story, and it was well past the 2-year sentence. And Alan said, and it's still dosing me. That's not really cricket, is it? And that man who, you know, dealt with it with stoical, tight upper lip British humour, and just to back what was obviously emotionally, physically happening to him, was also the same man who, during a darker night of the soul, wandered into his kitchen, opened a drawer, took out a carving knife and gouged his leg to try and remove the device. Wow. Which is why I gave him a limp in the last 2 scenes in the film, to honour that detail. But there was nothing that I didn't find out about him that was shocking. And overall, why more of us don't know about him. And this seems to be the general reaction when people...
Well, I'm assuming it's because so much that was kept secret in England.
Partly the 35 years Official Secrets Act because of his work in the war.
Could that film have been made 10 years ago?
I think 10 years ago, it was before the political campaign to get him pardoned on his centenary. I mean, it's absurd. He should have never been punished, of course, but he should have been pardoned years ago.
If you could have met him, what would you have asked?
Oh, God, so many things. I think I would have asked him, first of all, how on earth he thought he could live a life that was true to himself and not be punished for it. Because I think he did successfully live a very active homosexual life for a long time. And even when he was at Bletchley Park, he described that as a sexual desert, but he was engaged to Joan Clark, a dear friend, somebody who he had a complete and utter intellectual and spiritual bond with. But it was a platonic relationship, and it was a convenient cover, and they both loved each other in that way. And she was willing to have that as a relationship, and he couldn't live with the lie. And
kind of admirable.
I mean, there's so much I want to ask him, but I just want to give him a hug. He'd probably shrink away in horror if I tried, but incredible human being, incredible human being.
Eddie, you did meet Stephen Hawking.
From the second that both Felicity and I were cast, we'd been wanting to meet Jane and Stephen, but Stephen's incredibly busy solving some quite hardcore problems out there. But also he was promoting, had a documentary out which he was promoting, so it was actually only 5 days before we started filming. And it made it complicated, actually, because you'd done all these months of research, and because we knew we weren't going to be able to shoot chronologically, we'd had to, in some ways, and the film covers 20, 25 years, we'd had to shape a sort of arc, and then it was the fear, and we'd done all the research, but what if, when I meet him, I realise I got it all wrong, basically.
What if I reverse time to see what happened at the beginning of time itself?
Wind back the clock.
Wind back the clock?
Keep going.
I don't know how.
Yet.
Keep winding.
Where to?
The point our film takes it to, he can still use his finger, so he has a cursor, and so he could speak quicker than he does now. And so now it's just the cursor goes across the alphabet on the screen, and when he moves this muscle, it stops on one letter. So it's incredibly unique rhythm, and there are these long, long pauses. And so when I went to meet him, by this point I'd read everything and researched as much as I could. And I was just so horrifically nervous, and I hate silence. And so I basically just literally spent 45 minutes spewing out information about him to him. And it was disastrous. I mean, it was really chronically disastrous.
It's like one of those Saturday Night Live skits, you know, about John Candy meeting Paul McCartney or something like that.
Yeah. Didn't you, am I making this up, didn't you ask him what sign he was?
Thanks, Michael, for bringing that.
Did you offer that?
He said
That was so great.
It's the funniest anecdote.
So basically, I'm now sweating, which basically he...
And what sign is he?
He was born on the 8th of January, which was Galileo's birthday. And the reason I brought it up is because he makes a big point of the fact that he was born to the day 300 years after Galileo.
There you are.
And so I was in this silence because I was telling him this about himself. And I then said, I actually was born on the 6th of January, just so we're both Capricorns.
You say such weird stuff when we're nervous, man.
Horrific. Yeah, pink.
What was the most interesting thing Hawking said to you?
In the 3 hours I spent with him, he maybe said 8 or 9 sentences. But one of the things he asked me was, are you playing me before the voice machine? And I said yes. And he said my voice was very slurred. And there's one bit of documentary footage from the 80s where you hear Stephen speaking and he's completely incomprehensible to us. But his students and his wife would translate for him. If you wanted to be one of Stephen's students, you'd go and spend 2 weeks learning how to understand him. And I was, in the film, they were worried, the producers were worried about having subtitles. And I've been pushing to go to this extreme because it's the only bit of footage we had. And before that, all the work I was doing was sort of educated guess rather than, you know, a real truth. But after he said that to me, he said, could you not have someone translate? And that meant that I went back to the producers and the writers, and Anthony, the writer, wove in an element in the film in which Jane does translate. So that was pretty important because it was one of the specific things he cared about.
You initially turned down Foxcatcher. Was it because you didn't identify with the character?
I read it, and kind of just, I was like, I don't understand why you want to make it. I didn't know like what these characters like learned at the end of the day. I didn't know really what the movie was saying, and this was after I'd done my second film, and I just chalk it up to I had no idea what I was doing as an actor or as a storyteller or anything, and then you know, Bennett and I ran into each other about 7 years later, or 6 years later, and then we started talking about it again, and I think I had come a long way, and my understanding about what we're doing.
What's the biggest challenge for you?
Kicking ass.
Yeah.
Beating up Mark Ruffalo.
Getting my head kicked in every day by Bennett. You know, really being around Mark, I think we've talked about it a lot. I hadn't never done anything like this before, and I had no idea really how to approach it other than just to talk to Mark. And Mark Schultz,
who's the guy that you play?
Is the guy I play. And try to see through like who he was. You know, he's so factual. He has all these. He knows what move that so and so did on so and so to win the '84 Olympics. You know, he knows, and he just reels off all these things, and you're trying to like sort through them all. And really, you know, I kind of just started to just get rid of all the stuff all the data that he was telling me about his life, and he said one thing that I just clicked into, and he just goes, I never wanted to win, I just didn't want to lose. And that was it.
Now, do you identify with that in real life?
I think at some point I did, but not now.
But what is the difference between not losing and winning? What
For
does
him,
it mean?
it was fear of not being the person that he saw himself as, I think. And Dave, his older brother, was this shining example of like something that he knew he could never be. He was never going to be this just charismatic individual that everyone sort of flocked to. So he decided to go the other way, and he wanted everyone to be afraid of him. He didn't want anyone to get close to him, and I think that's a really lonely walk to choose.
We as a nation have failed to honor you. I want to see this country soar again.
What's he get out of all this?
Me winning. America winning. This is more than just some piece of metal. It's about what the metal represents, the virtues it requires to attain it.
How does it feel when you're talking to the man and you know that the story is going to have an angle in form of the script? Did he have script approval? Did he look at the script at all or not at all? And did you feel that thing of like going, well, I need something from you, but you might not get anything back from me other than something that's going to upset you?
Yeah, that was my fear.
Yeah.
Because I knew all these things that he was telling me that he wanted in the script wasn't in the script. You know, the retribution of people that he felt wronged him. And I knew that wasn't in there, and I just, you know, I was terribly afraid that
What was
he
the
wasn't gonna be
seduction of getting him to sort of open up and collaborate?
It wasn't. He was completely and utterly free and open with me as far as I could tell. I mean, there was nothing that was off limits. I could ask him any question. Within the first 7 seconds of talking, he was welling up with tears. I don't know, he's a very emotional person, and I think all of it was pretty overwhelming for us both.
It's not surprising that he remembered every move and what happened. Athletes, they're not like the rest of us. It's a different type of mentality. Baseball players, you're a ball fan, well, they'll remember
it was a
the
slider,
pitch, the inning, what the wind was doing. They remember everything. And there's something in particular about wrestlers. It's so difficult, and it becomes a real deep mental discipline. And every time I meet someone, learn they were a wrestler, and you start to look at their life, you go, oh yeah, this guy, he doesn't
Is there
like
any
to lose.
one thing that sets actors apart like that? Oh, you're a pretty determined person.
Right. I'll tag on to that. I think wrestling in particular is very, very similar in a metaphorical way to acting. You're wrestling. You're literally in a fight with what's going on with you. Like you're in a suffocating situation, and there's no resting. You can't take a minute. You're constantly in this uncomfortable state, dealing with a lot of emotions, a lot of fear.
Fear of what?
Fear of just doing it honestly, of giving everything that you could have given to it, you know, and not walking away and being like, God, I didn't do the work for that one, you know.
Is it harder when you're a star and everybody knows, you know, the social media universe is going to pick on every single thing you do?
I think they pick on us all. Everyone gets picked on. I don't think it's just because, you know, we're up on a screen.
Do you like being a star?
I don't really look at it that way. I think I've been afforded a lot of opportunity in this world, and I've tried to walk through every door that I've been given, and some of them have been great on the other side, and other ones haven't.
Namely what?
I think the pressure of what school is projected as when you're growing up, that going to college is the answer, and to me it wasn't. I tried, and I went, and I didn't get it, and I failed at it miserably, and I felt like a failure for it, and so I went and tried to find another door.
That's not a failure at all. To me, that's a victory. You said, this ain't me. I'm going to go do what's me.
Yeah, to know that is a success. That's to bring yourself closer to an understanding of yourself, which is a mighty achievement.
Michael, how about you? You turned your back on Hollywood at one point and moved to Montana.
Yeah, not really. I mean, I never turned my back on it, really. I just probably went through a phase that may not be over, of kind of getting tired of hearing yourself kind of do the same old thing, and fairly proud of the fact that I don't often do the same thing, but to me, I do the same thing, and I'd hear the same kind of rhythms and maybe tricks. And
when you did Birdman, was that an opportunity to do something different?
Yeah.
To what extent did you want to get away from yourself in playing that character?
A couple of things. I'm playing someone who exists now, actually, a journalist, and it's just really interesting to listen to these guys, just to listen to them. But when you do play someone else...
Because they speak English the right way.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, let's not start this.
No,
this is about...
No, it's so long we have English party at this table.
Channing's huge.
Sorry, I guess
There's more than one way of talking English. There's plenty of different American accents. There's plenty of different ways
I'll see what I can do for you there, sport.
Right.
I've done that, and I'm currently playing someone now, but in a lot of ways, in terms of the personality, I didn't particularly at all, really, relate to this guy. But look, I'm an actor, and I played Batman, so there was that. You know, to act like that wasn't a factor, it's just silly. But yeah, I did the work the same way I always do the work. You buckle down and approach it essentially the same way.
That's what I'm talking about. You're Birdman. You are a god.
Hey! Is this for real, or are you shooting a film?
A film!
You people are full of crap!
Music.
He's a Hollywood clown in a lycra bird suit.
Yes, he is. But he's going out on that stage and risking everything.
It's about being respected and validated. Remember, that's what you told me.
I got a chance to do something right. I gotta take it.
Give the people what they want. Let's go back one more time and show them what we're capable of.
One of the great benefits of working with, over the long-term period with Mike Leigh, is that it's lovely to work with a collaborator. 33 years I've worked with him, 7 times over 33 years. And, you know, I've plied my trade mainly as a kind of character, supporting actor. He's always been the director that's asked me to play the leading roles, you know. And this time now I'm playing the titular head, the eponymous character. So this character was difficult because all the research, and there's a lot of it, was all absolutely contradictory. Every picture of him looked different. Every piece of actual eyewitness account of how he was looked different. So what you were dealing with was trying to build this character. Every time you go one way with it, you were contradicting yourself. But luckily, we created it on an amalgam of human beings and alchemized the various people. So he was a contradiction anyway. I must have read about 7 biographies about this guy and looked at pictures, looked at all his work. And then all of a sudden I realised that actually the whole point of making stop the contradiction being a barrier, and the contradiction was the whole point. I mean, we're all contradictions as human beings. We are massive contradictions, some to a lesser or larger degree.
Mr. Turner seems to have taken leave of form altogether. Turner.
Clearly losing his eyesight.
A masterpiece I here present, which Mr. Turner has just sent.
I believe you to be a man of great spirit and fine feeling. The universe is chaotic, and you make us see it. You are a man of great vision, Mr. Turner.
So when we were liberated by the fact that this bloke was both kind and horrible, generous and mean, funny, wicked, sometimes really sweet, sometimes a total arsehole. And what was brilliant about that was very, very difficult trying to create this genius, this visual poet, who happened to turn out to be someone who was like a simian, somebody's, I say simian ape-like, but a lot of people say he's like a pig, you know? Anyway, there's all sorts of, there's a whole zoo of animals that people have said. But what is great is that it was difficult, but then we realised to create someone who was actually revolutionising the sublime, and the sublime didn't mean what is now a rather camp term for a rather charming piece of cheesecake. The sublime meant that somebody was able to convey, paint, realise and make you understand what is both beautiful in nature and horrendous at the same time. So this beauty, you look at Turner and you think, my God, what is this? Some of it is conventional and some of it, his later work is not. And you think, what created that? And if you didn't know anything about Turner that we were revealing, you'd think he was this romantic character. And then this guy was revealing this mud creature, this amazing... And then we realised, in fact, the more we went with that, the more we realised the tension within inside this incongruous genius was the man that created that. It was never going to be someone who was going to have an easy time.
But isn't that true of any creative person?
I think to a certain degree there's a lot of tension. There are a lot of handsome and rather people who get lucky with all sorts of things who are still pretty
brilliant. But aren't
brilliant.
great artists inherently complicated,
destructive as well as creative? Well, it's that Jungian thing, isn't it? The erotic and the destructive, those are the two sort of primal forces. The erotic to join and have empathy and love, whether it's one-to-one or through society or language or culture, and then the destructive is to define yourself as different and separate and build walls and fight wars. That is kind of human nature.
Yeah, and it's funny, isn't it, when the surrealists like Max Ernst, any of those, a lot of them used to get up in the morning, have a wash, shave, put on a suit and a tie, and sit and paint the most remarkable insides of the fantasies of someone's, surreal mind. So it's always the mixture of turmoil is often always there.
Did you see the Leo McKern Turner?
I remember it, yeah, but I didn't watch it again. You don't want to copy anybody, and also especially if someone's really good, you don't want to start from a position of thinking, oh my God, I mean, someone's already done it much better than I'm going to do it, so you're better off just ignoring.
Ethan, how about you? Your decision to do Boyhood. What was the most challenging thing about taking that on?
Nothing was challenging about it, because I feel that we all get a lot of credit sometimes for taking risks or something, but when you're working with a world-class filmmaker, I don't ever feel I'm taking a risk. That's when you feel safe. But what was interesting about Boyhood was that Rick was offering me a job I don't think an actor had ever been offered before, which was to really get to use time as your clay. He came to me and said, I want to do this movie about a young boy. Right, we're going to cast a 6-year-old boy, and I want it to kind of be like literature a little bit, and we're going to just write it as we go, and I want you to do a portrait of fatherhood. I was a young dad. My daughter was 3, and my son was on the way. And both of our fathers are very similar. We're both from Texas. Both our dads are in the insurance business, soft-spoken men, baseball fanatics. We have a lot in common. He said, I want you to do a portrait of fatherhood. And I immediately had the sensation of remembering who my dad was when I was 6 and who he was when I graduated from high school and how different that person was. And wouldn't it be interesting to try to connect those dots where you could really use time and see from a child's point of view how time shapes a man? So was it challenging? Yes, I guess, but all under the category of fun.
All right, no. No, that is not how we are going to talk to one another, all right?
No, I will not be that guy. You cannot put me in that category, all right? The biological father I spend every other week with and I make polite conversation, you know, while he drives me places and buys me shit. No. Talk to me. Samantha, how was your week? I don't know, Dad, it was kind of tough. Billy and Ellen broke up, and Ellen's kind of mad at me because she saw me talking to Billy in the cafeteria. And you remember that sculpture I was working on? Well, it was a unicorn, and the horn broke off, so now it's a zebra, okay? But I still think I'm gonna get an A, right? Mason, how was your week? Well, Dad, you know, it's kind of tough. Joe, he's kind of a jerk. Actually, he stole some cigarettes from his mom. He wanted me to smoke them, but I said no, because I knew what a hard time you had quitting smoking, Dad.
Seamless, the way he did it. And you have to also factor in, which often people don't factor in, degree of difficulty. Alejandro Iñárritu, as an example. If degree of difficulty were factored into somebody giving somebody something or judging something, you got to really, what Ethan did, because I watched it and I thought, man, those are smooth transitions. And it's one thing to be locked into your work for 2 months or 3 months or 5 months or whatever it is, and that's kind of where your focus is, and you can track the transitions, you can track the changes and the levels. He had to, am I wrong, go away, maybe work on a play, work on another film, and come back and slide back into those transitions.
How did you do that?
Because you never really gave up the guy.
Because you also didn't have a finished script when you started. Did you see what work you'd done? Did you come back a year later and say, okay, let's see what we have so far, or?
I had a real clear idea of what we were trying to achieve, of what I was going for, and it just became about, when do we sell the GTO?
Yeah.
When's the right time? When does it seem like it? You know that film, by the time the GTO gets sold, by the time your dad sold that car that you identified with your dad, you know, my dad has a Chevy Impala or whatever, a Barracuda, whatever it is, I identified masculinity with this car. And by the time it happens and the car is gone, it actually was 3 years after the moment.
Huh.
It seemed inevitable. It wasn't, do you know what I mean at all? Anyway, it was fun to do.
Benedict, I've always felt with you that you resist fame to some degree. Is that true?
There's so many strands of it, aren't there? I mean, if you mean being scrutinized in your public life, which isn't your work, if you mean requirements of your time which distract your focus and your energy from what actually brought you to that point where you're being distracted with your focus and your energy, that's a complete catch-22. The more work you do, the more attention there is, so therefore, it's a strange thing. You try to escape by, dissolving into work, and it keeps catching up with you every time you stop, because it's something that's part of the process of work now to publicize it. So I'm saying that because it feels hypocritical to make any complaint about fame when I'm doing a roundtable now for the Hollywood Reporter. What the fuck have I got to say that's, it's ridiculous that I'm complaining about fame and sitting here complaining about fame.
Do you have a role model whose career you emulate? Olivier, for instance?
Hundreds. No, not specifically, no, definitely not. Olivier,
who most influenced you as an actor?
Oh, well, many, at different moments. And we talked before the tape was running about Stephen Delane's Hamlet when I was 17. That was a massive impact on me. The sort of essential, quiet, still truth of what he did and the hilarity of it just utterly owned every single beat of that character. I knew nobody else was Hamlet but him, it was extraordinary.
And then you saw mine.
And then I saw his.
And then your whole being changed.
Yeah.
I know.
What about you?
I really appreciate you saying that.
Is there some actor whose work you wish you want to emulate or who's really taught you something?
When I first came out to LA, I rented Clean and Sober, and I probably watched it like 17 times back to back with friends of mine. And that was at a moment for me when acting was becoming very real. Like I was really a student of it, and you were, Batman, Beetlejuice, Clean and Sober, this stuff, you were just kicking ass and doing all this unbelievable work that I found so inspiring, And I also loved your interviews. You do these interviews and call everything the way it was, or the way it kind of seemed like it could be to me.
Oh, cool.
I think sometimes we don't know that what we do, we all have an effect on other people. And what we do does matter, every little thing. And when acting was at its most malleable for me, You were a real inspiration and continue to be, obviously. But
what would you do if you didn't act? If you had to choose another profession, what would it be?
Oh, something in the performing arts.
How about
directing,
you?
producing plays.
God, I have no idea, but I want to jump back to that last thing only because I've never said this to you, Tim, but
here we go.
No, but only because...
Please don't start with the useful phrase, yeah. Come on. This will get cut, so...
It was really special. When I was a kid, I don't come from a theatrical family at all, or like have any interest, and my mum and dad, because I had an interest, would take me to the theatre. And one of the first things I went and saw was A Midsummer Night's Dream at the National Theatre. And Tim was playing Bottom. And it was all set in mud, and there was a contortionist playing Puck, this woman. And when the ears came onto Bottom, this contortionist got up on Tim's shoulders, and her feet were the ears. And I remember afterwards we went on a tour behind, and that is when I got sold on genuinely on the magic of it, and I know it's sycophantic, but it now does feel like the
Was that the one moment when you thought, I want to act?
It is it's the time when I was like, because I didn't know anything about that world. And
How old were you then?
I don't know. Was it directed by
Robert Lepage? Yeah. So we heard you say that, it's fantastic because it was one of the most uncomfortable experiences I've ever had in my life. Not only were you performing in the best designed wet fart you'd ever seen in your life.
Swamp, basically.
But I had a French-Canadian contortionist on my back when I was trying to do Shakespeare comedy. And it felt like hell. And you'd go backstage and there were people wearing verruca socks, which are planters' warts, you know? And it looked like an IRA dirty protest back at the Royal National Theatre. You never got a sensation whether the audience were enjoying it or not because it was so attritional. I mean, I've got to tell you this story. One day, somebody came in because they had to test. It was in a massive pile of water. I'm so pleased, Eddie, that you liked it because somebody came in and said, "You've not heard the latest. Someone's done a poo in the mud."
Oh my God!
Right? And I said, "What are you talking about? Someone's done a poo in the mud." I said, "I'm lying in that before the audience come in." They said, "Well, you know, we have to test it. Someone's done a shit in the mud." I said, "This is outrageous." And I went to the stage doorkeeper at the National Theatre, who'd been there for years, wonderful woman. I said, "You're never going to guess what I've just heard. You know the fairies were all diving around in the mud. Someone's done a poo in it." She said, "Oh, that doesn't surprise me. We've had a phantom shit at the Royal National Theatre for years." I said, "Could you run that by me again? A phantom shitter at the Royal National..." I now think of all the people who've worked at the National. Who is the phantom? Is he still there? And who started it? I mean, there's a pantheon of the most brilliant classical actors in the world. And someone was dropping a log in there. So we're talking about the classics here, but, you know, talk about a spoiler.
What's the biggest mistake you've made?
Wow, you're not holding back.
I think one of the biggest mistakes you could make is think that you know enough.
Yeah.
Because you can't, because otherwise you'd stop and you'd just keep repeating yourself.
It's funny, I did a movie, I remember I was about 29 years old, and I remember being very frustrated with the director because I felt that he was an idiot and he was really holding me back from doing the work that I wanted to do. And when I think back on it now, I feel so embarrassed. Turned 30, and all of a sudden it was like another room opened up, and all of a sudden I saw hallways of things I didn't know. And the older I get, the more I would never be frustrated with a director like that. You know, you have to meet them. There's a great Brando quote about that, about you have to meet every director as your kind of spiritual spouse. You just have to marry them to make the movie they want to make. Because if you're resisting them all along, they're going to be in the editing room. It won't be your performance and it won't be there.
Brando
well, he said it at a very young age.
Right. I mean, he famously resisted his directors, would famously give them a take to see if they could tell the difference.
Yeah, he says that kind of thing. And yet, if you watch Last Tango in Paris, that is an actor completely committed to that story. And he's inside a movie the way that, you know, you very rarely see inside a very dangerous film, a film that deals with erotica, which, I mean, human sexuality is something, you know, that nobody wants to talk about on a real adult level, about mourning, death, fear of getting older, sex. You know, I mean, you're talking about turning, and you're talking about, you know, being gay, whether the movie could have been made 10 years ago. And I can't help but think about just simply 20 years ago, how radical it was for an actor to play a gay person. When River Phoenix was in My Own Private Idaho, this is not a movie about a war, you know, a secret, top secret war guy. This is just about a young kid who wants to be gay. It was radical that he was doing that. You know, I was his age and his contemporary, and it was like, people will think you're gay, dude. You know, you can't do that. Your career will be over. And
I think there's a vestige of that still.
I was going to say,
but in 20 years, that has come a long way.
What's the line you can't cross today? Is there any threshold that you can't?
Paedophilia is probably.
Paedophilia
might be the one that might give you a tag.
There aren't a lot of pedophilia.
And actually, Kevin Bacon was brave enough to do that, I think.
Yeah, and it was really scary to people that he did that.
To play a sympathetic paedophile would be difficult. Could you make The Last Temptation of Christ today and get away with it?
Martin Scorsese could. It was dangerous
at that
time. He had trouble. He would have trouble now. Anytime you
the
face...
Farrelly brothers might have a hard time.
Yeah, you know. But, you know, I think the real conversation to have here is the one that we're joking about, which is that, you know, the fact that there are 3 Englishmen at this table. I mean, 4, but 3 of the 6 actors here. And I would really wonder whether, to what connection, if you looked at the last 50 years of the Academy Awards, for example, what percentage of them were British? And why, here in this giant country of America, this, you know, I don't think Americans are represented at the BAFTA. They don't take us that seriously. But we take you guys
let's ask you the question.
Extremely seriously.
Why is that?
I've been to England and worked on the English stage and seen the respect not only that the actors have for acting, but the community at large. Even the way they review it and critique it.
There's more
it's
celebrity.
so hard for a young person like you coming up to have the right fence posts of which to guide yourself. There's so much respect given to youth and money, whereas when you get to London, who's really respected? Vanessa Redgrave. Who's really respected? Ian McKellen. You know, these people, Mike Lee.
Tim, do you agree with that?
I think Ethan's being very, very complimentary about that, but I think it grows if it has a structure. It's grown out of the fact that we don't actually really have a film industry. People don't get whipped up and sucked up and taken away and lost into a system that can spoil you because we haven't got one. You know? So it forces you, it makes you retrench back into what we've got.
True. And also we're spoilt in the sense that, you know, there's a more bookish, intellectual, theatre-based culture in New York, whereas LA is about the visual image. So, you know, we're really lucky in that extent. We don't have to make a specific geographical choice as to where we will begin our career. So we don't have to wait tables for years to get a break in a pilot season. We can cut our teeth doing fringe shows, doing stuff at my old school. You know, you can just you can find and make.
Who taught you the most?
Oh, wow. At what stage? Because my first ever teacher taught me extraordinary truth by literally line reading Shakespeare at me. That then opened blank verse so I could read it like prose the next year. My modern drama teacher, as he was termed because he did the less ancient than Shakespeare plays, he opened the doors of American theatre to me and the wonders of Mamet and Miller and Tennessee Williams. I mean, just the whole raft of it. And then beyond that, you get incredible, the nuggets of wisdom that I will carry to my grave from, well, hopefully using them as well. But things about being present, things about not fixing things onto yourself, about grounding a truth from within, and getting away from the hatbox thing, because I grew up doing a lot of stuff at school. My voice broke. I went from playing sort of Titania, Queen of the Fairies, or Rosalind, and As You Like It, to playing Willy Loman, age 17. So I had this huge kind of showing off period of, look at me, you know.
I think also the interesting thing about the 3 characters we're playing is it's about British stories, so it's history. I think that's the other thing that England, the films that make it over here are quite often to do with heritage and legacy, and that's because of history. And we're very lucky to have in these 3 specific films. They're quite extraordinary. Not that we don't have that in the past. But
very true, but to lower the tone slightly down back to a sort of British entertainment and Hollywood, so-called Hollywood, which is a broad church, never underestimate how pleased British actors are and how much they yearn to work in Hollywood.
It's true.
It's not like, oh, darling, we just do it because we're slummy. People might pretend, they say, oh, Hollywood, oh, you know, I suppose if one is asked, one will go. But that's a load of balls, because most people, given the opportunity, if they were given a part in a Hollywood movie, would jump at it.
True story.
And they would say, you can stick Polonius at Cheadle Wreck straight up where it comes from if you're going to play a lead in a Hollywood movie. So let's get that right.
Absolutely true.
Last question for all of you. Is there one character or one person you would like to play or be intimidated to play?
I don't know why it just popped in my head, but Buster Keaton.
Oh, wow.
Don't know why I just jumped up. Because I know a little bit about him, and obviously he was an extraordinary athlete and performer, but he was partly deaf. And that's the reason why he didn't really make it into the, talkies or whatever. He couldn't do that, very well.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
And what was so fascinating, he's the last person I would have expected you to...
I don't know why. It just literally popped in my mind.
But you'd like to play or you'd be scared to play?
I think both. I mean, I think I'm scared to play everything that I'm interested in, because you just want to do it well and do it justice, I guess.
Michael?
Ted Williams, not the most loved man in the world, but extraordinary guy, actually. I can't really think of anyone else. But before we go any further, you know what I wanted to do? Thank you. I know you get a little uncomfortable with warmth, but I thought that was a nice, very, very nice thing to say. Thank you very much.
So tell us...
And coming from a really good actor.
Well, tell us why Ted Williams.
Ted Williams is a complicated person and an extraordinary set of balls. And I literally mean his balls. No. Literally. Gorgeous. His gonads were a fantastic set of marbles. He still holds the record for the highest average of anyone when given the choice of sitting out a game or stepping up to bat to see if he could be the only, what did he end up at, 400 or 401 or something like that?
Over 400.
Over 400. He said, no, I'll bat. And then I think 2 singles or something, instead of saying, no, I'm safe, I've got the record now, I'll be okay.
But he could lower his average, yeah.
Yeah, and being afraid of it, he embraced it. He was also a world-class fly fisherman far before it was a trendy thing. And that,
even before Redford?
Oh, yeah.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, I'm kidding. Yeah, and he was a heroic World War II pilot who I think was shot down once or twice. And really, really complicated dude.
Tim?
Well, I've always been fascinated by Charles Law.
Oh, yeah.
And, playing actors is it's a little bit inverted and self-indulgent, but there's something so fascinating about, I think one of my earliest memories ever of seeing an actor and being both frightened, terrified, so sorry for something and frightened by it was The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I watched it when I was must have been like 4 or 5, and I shall never forget that what he achieved, that mixture of being frightening, pathetic, sad, and then eventually triumphant. And of course, he had a very interesting life. So,
me too. That's one. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'll let you finish.
Sorry.
That's one of the roles too. When I was a little kid, I saw that. I thought that I was fascinated by it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, not in the slightest, because that's really all.
How about you?
I don't really think in those terms about people that I want to play. In the life of an actor, you kind of long to intersect with a writer in the right way. You know that sometimes, like, for example, if you saw Mark Rylance in Jez Butterworth's Jerusalem, you see the intersection of a writer and an actor, and then they blow up together, you know. I felt the same way about Nathan Lane in a play he did last year. Now it's going to escape me the title, The Nance, where you just feel like, oh, this play is meeting this actor at this moment in their life, and the play is bigger and the actor is bigger, everything is more. And I think we all kind of long to be a part of something original. You know,
Eddie?
Do you know what? I'm one of those people that, like at school, I would hate to be told, go and make up your own essay title. Do you know what I mean? I like to be told what the essay title is, and then I go and, like, I would never, particularly with something like the Stephen Hawking film, I would never have thought you're right for that unless you read a script and you then throw yourself at it.
Well, you did fight for this role of Hawking, didn't you?
I did fight for it because I read the script and it sort of blew my mind. But I fought for it in that way that I feel like we all do. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you believe that you can do it. You do that thing of like applying for a job and appearing really confident and telling people the right things, and then you get it, and then you reassess how you're going to go about it. But for several years, random people have come up to me going, by the way, you should play Richard II at some point. And I'd go, okay. And then eventually, a couple of years ago, I was doing a job and I got a call from a British director, Michael Grandage. He's like, by the way, I'm going to say 2 words and you have to say yes or no. He said, Richard II. I was too embarrassed to admit that I'd never read Richard II, but enough people had said that I should play it that I was like, okay, and I said yes. I then went and read the play, and he's like this completely sort of futile, extraordinary character, but sort of useless, pathetic. Sort of, why did everyone think I was so appropriate for that part? I've always found the most interesting things in my life have always been those parts that are so far from me, and then I go, well, let's just try going in for it and see what happens.
Benedict?
Dolly Parton. No, I mean, you know, come on. I mean, it's not an obvious choice, but it's a choice. I got the voice. I've got the. I was going to say the chest. Yeah. I'm slightly the same as Eddie. I've sort of lived in that fortunate sort of land of just.
By the way, I wasn't sure that you were joking when you said Dolly Parton.
That's very sweet of you. That's a huge compliment.
I do find it brilliant, fascinating, original,
and a woman. But apart from that, it's
what's wrong with saying that?
No. I mean, no. She does deserve a film about her. But I can think of better actors than me that are more appropriately anatomically designed to do that role. No, seriously though, like Eddie, I've had this sort of very lucky confluence of things that have interested me that people have talked about before, whether they're classic roles or whether they're things that I've written with me in mind, and. I've kind of fallen on my feet a bit. I mean, I like the idea of, you know, determining choices and amongst that, but not. I don't harbour an ambition to play a particular person there.
Good. Well, thank you. I'd like to thank Tim Spall, Ethan Hawke, Eddie Redmayne, Benedict Cumberbatch, Channing Tatum, and Michael Keaton for taking part in the Hollywood Reporter Roundtables, the actors. Thank you.
Nice to meet you guys. Nice to meet you guys again.
Nice to meet you, sir.
Thank you.
Nice to meet all of you.